I still remember the exact moment I realized my entire marriage was a performance. It wasn't during some dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It was on a Tuesday morning, while I was making coffee in my own kitchen, when I heard my husband tell me he loved me. Twice. Let me back up, because that probably sounds insane. My name is Emma, and for 12 years I thought I had the perfect marriage. David was everything I'd ever wanted: attentive, successful, romantic in all the little ways that mattered. Every single morning, without fail, he would kiss me goodbye and say, "I love you, Em," before heading to his home office. It was our ritual. Our constant. The thing that made me feel secure even on my worst days. But 3 months ago, I made a mistake. A tiny, insignificant mistake that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life. I grabbed the wrong phone. We had the same model. His idea, actually. He said it was practical for sharing chargers and cases. That morning, I'd been rushing to check if my sister had texted me back about our mother's birthday dinner, and I snatched what I thought was my phone from the kitchen counter. I unlocked it. We knew each other's passcodes, of course we did. We had nothing to hide, and I saw a message notification that made my blood run cold. "Good morning, my love. I miss you already." It was sent at 6:47 a.m. to someone named Claire. But here's the thing that really made my stomach drop. David had kissed me goodbye at 6:45 a.m. I'd heard him say, "I love you," as he walked to his office. And now, 2 minutes later, he was texting another woman the same sentiment. I stood there in my kitchen, holding my husband's phone, trying to find an innocent explanation. Maybe Claire was a client who was overly familiar? Maybe it was his sister, and I'd somehow never met her? My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. That's when I heard it. From his office down the hall. I heard my husband's voice, muffled but distinct. "I love you, Claire. Have a beautiful day." And in that moment, I realized I didn't just have a cheating husband. I had something far, far worse. Because David wasn't just saying, "I love you" to two women. He was living two entirely separate lives, with two separate morning routines, two separate worlds. And I was about to discover that I wasn't even in the real one. I need you to understand what my marriage looked like from the outside, because without that context, what comes next won't make any sense. David and I met at a marketing conference in Chicago 14 years ago. I was 26, working my first real corporate job, and he was this confident, charming account director who somehow made discussing brand strategy feel like flirting. We clicked instantly. He pursued me with this wonderful old-fashioned intensity, flowers, handwritten notes, thoughtful dates where he actually listened when I talked. We got married after 2 years of dating. The wedding was small but perfect, just like I'd always wanted. David cried during his vows. His voice cracked when he promised to love me through everything life threw at us. And I remember thinking that I was the luckiest woman alive. Our marriage fell into a comfortable rhythm. David worked from home as a consultant, which gave him flexibility. I worked in human resources at a mid-sized tech company. We didn't have kids. That was a mutual decision we'd made early on. David said he wanted to focus entirely on us, on building our life together without the complications children brought. At the time, I'd found it romantic. Now I realize it gave him exactly what he needed. No witnesses to his daily routine. Every morning was the same. I'd wake up at 6:30, and David would already be up brewing coffee. We'd sit together for exactly 20 minutes, talking about our plans for the day, nothing deep or meaningful. Just the comfortable small talk of people who knew each other completely. Then I'd get ready for work, and he'd kiss me goodbye at exactly 6:45 a.m. Always the same time, I realized later, always the same script, before retreating to his home office for his first virtual meeting. Every evening, we'd have dinner together. We'd watch TV, curled up on the couch. We'd make love twice a week, usually Wednesday and Saturday nights, and it was good. Not explosive but warm and connected. On weekends, we'd go hiking or try new restaurants or work in the garden. We had couple friends. We hosted dinner parties. We took anniversary trips to places like Napa Valley and the Florida Keys. From the outside, we were boring in the best possible way. Stable. Secure. Happy. I'd been so convinced of our happiness that I'd never questioned anything. Why David's consulting business was so successful he could afford our beautiful 4-bedroom house on his income alone, even though I'd never quite understood what his clients hired him to do. Why he always wanted me to keep working, even though we didn't need the money, insisting it was important for me to maintain my independence. Why he never wanted me to visit him during his workday, even for lunch, saying his schedule was too unpredictable. Why he had 2 phones. I'd noticed the second phone, of course. But David had explained it so reasonably. It was his work phone, he said, for client calls and confidential business. He didn't want work bleeding into our personal life by having everything on one device. It made perfect sense. I'd even admired his boundary setting. Standing in my kitchen that Tuesday morning, staring at the message from Claire, I realized that every single thing I'd admired about my husband was actually part of an elaborately constructed lie. I heard his office door open. My heart nearly exploded out of my chest. I still had his phone in my hand, his personal phone. The phone that had Claire's message on it. The phone I was never supposed to see. I shoved it back onto the counter just as David walked into the kitchen. He smiled at me, that familiar warm smile that had made me fall in love with him. He looked completely relaxed, wearing the gray sweater I'd given him for Christmas, his hair slightly messy in the way I'd always found attractive. "Forgot my coffee," he said, reaching past me for his mug. Then he paused, his eyes flicking to the counter where both phones sat side by side. "Did you move my phones?" "I was cleaning up," I said, and I was amazed at how normal my voice sounded. "You left them right in the wet spot from the coffee maker." "Thanks, babe." He kissed my forehead, grabbed both phones without even checking them, and headed back to his office. The door closed behind him. I stood there, gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing. Who was Claire? How long had this been going on? Was it just an emotional affair, or had they been physical? Did she know about me? And then a worse thought crept in. What if Claire wasn't the only one? I called in sick to work. I told them I had a migraine, which wasn't even a lie. My head was pounding, and I felt like I might vomit. I went upstairs to our bedroom and closed the door, then just sat on the edge of the bed, trying to process what I'd discovered. Part of me wanted to burst into his office and confront him immediately. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of what else I'd discover. Or maybe some deep, buried instinct told me that if I confronted him now, he'd have time to prepare, to lie, to minimize. I needed to know the truth first. All of it. I spent that entire day in the bedroom, my ear pressed against the wall that adjoined David's office, listening. I felt pathetic doing it, like some paranoid housewife from a bad movie. But I heard him on calls, multiple calls, with different people. His voice changed with each one. With some clients, he was professional and distant. But then I heard him talking to someone else, his voice dropping to that intimate tone I'd thought was reserved only for me. "I miss you too," he said. "I know, baby. Just a few more hours." Baby. He just called someone baby. I felt like the walls were closing in. When David emerged from his office at 6 p.m., exactly 6 p.m. like always, he found me in the kitchen, pretending to prep dinner. I'd forced myself to shower and change clothes, to look normal, to act like my entire world hadn't imploded. "How was your day?" he asked, kissing my cheek like always. "Fine," I said. "Boring meetings. How about you?" Same old, same old. Conference calls with tedious clients. You know how it is." I watched him move around our kitchen, opening a bottle of wine, asking about my mother's birthday plans, laughing at something on the news. He was so convincing. So utterly, completely normal. If I hadn't seen that message myself, I would never have suspected a thing. That night, lying in bed next to my husband, listening to him breathe in his sleep, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I was going to become an investigator in my own marriage. I was going to find out exactly who David really was. Because something told me that Claire was just the beginning. And I had no idea how right I was. What I was about to discover wasn't just an affair. It was an entire second life, complete with a second home, a second wife, and a conspiracy so elaborate that when I finally unraveled it, I would question every single moment of the past 12 years. But first, I had to figure out how to steal my husband's phone without him noticing. The next morning, I became a stranger to myself. I've always been a straightforward person. I hated games, hated dishonesty, prided myself on direct communication. But necessity makes liars of us all. And I discovered I was much better at deception than I'd ever imagined. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., a full hour before my normal time, while David was still asleep beside me. I crept downstairs in the darkness, my heart hammering, and found both of his phones charging in his office. I grabbed the personal phone, the one with Claire's message, and took it into the bathroom. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped it while entering his passcode. The phone unlocked. I had maybe 20 minutes before David woke up and noticed it was missing. I started with the messages. Claire wasn't just some affair. The text chain between them went back 3 years. 3 years of good morning, my love, and I can't wait to see you tonight, and you're my whole world. There were pictures, not explicit ones, thank God, but photos of Claire at restaurants, Claire on a beach, Claire in what looked like a very nice living room. She was beautiful in an effortless way, with dark hair and a warm smile. She looked about my age. But it was the details in the messages that made me feel like I was losing my mind. David told Claire he loved her every single morning. Just like he told me. But he also told her about his day, about client meetings and frustrations and funny things that happened. Things he never told me. He asked about her work as a graphic designer, remembered details about her projects, supported her through problems with her mother's health. He was having an entire emotional relationship with this woman, in parallel to ours. The same conversations, the same rituals, the same promises. Then I saw a message from 2 weeks ago that stopped my heart. Claire. I still can't believe we've been married for 3 years tomorrow. Best decision I ever made. David. Same here, baby. You're everything to me. Can't wait to celebrate tonight. Married. They were married. I actually laughed out loud, a hysterical, broken sound that echoed in the bathroom. My husband was married to another woman. Not dating. Not just having an affair. Married. Which meant our marriage, my marriage, was... I couldn't even finish the thought. I forced myself to keep looking. I opened his calendar app. It was color-coded. I realized blue events and gray events. The blue events were all vague. Client meeting, conference call, site visit. But they corresponded to his schedule as I knew it, the framework of our life together. The gray events told a different story. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, dinner with C. Saturday mornings, brunch with C. 3-day weekend trips marked as conference in Denver, or training in Portland. Every single one had a corresponding gray event. Anniversary trip, or weekend getaway with Claire. He'd been living 2 complete, full lives. Spending roughly equal time with each of us. Maintaining 2 homes, 2 relationships, 2 separate realities. But the calendar raised more questions than it answered. Because I knew exactly how much money David made. We had a joint account for household expenses, and I'd seen his business tax returns when we'd refinanced the house 2 years ago. He made good money, but not enough to maintain 2 separate households in our expensive city. Not enough for the lifestyle we had plus an entire second life. I heard footsteps upstairs. David was awake. I quickly took photos of everything with my own phone, messages, calendar, photos. Then I deleted my photo-taking activity from his recent apps list, closed everything, and carefully wiped my fingerprints off the screen with my pajama shirt. I slipped out of the bathroom and ran to his office, putting the phone back exactly where I'd found it. I made it back to the bedroom just as David emerged from our bathroom. "You're up early," he said, smiling at me. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Big presentation today." He kissed me, and I let him, even though every cell in my body was screaming. His lips felt like a stranger's. Like poison. "I love you, Em," he said. "Love you too," I whispered. And for the first time in 12 years, I meant it as a lie. I went to work that day, but I have no memory of what I did. I must have attended meetings, answered emails, had conversations with colleagues. But my mind was somewhere else entirely, spiraling through possibilities and implications. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and called a divorce attorney whose number I'd found online. The receptionist was professional and kind, probably used to people calling while barely holding it together. But when I explained my situation, that I'd discovered my husband was married to someone else, the attorney herself got on the line. "Mrs. Crawford," she said carefully, "I need you to clarify something. Are you saying your husband is currently married to another woman, while married to you?" "Yes," I said. "He's a bigamist." There was a long pause. "That's a criminal offense. Not just grounds for divorce, an actual crime. Are you certain?" Was I certain? I'd seen their messages, seen them refer to their wedding anniversary. But I hadn't actually seen proof of a marriage certificate, had I? "I need to be sure," I said. "I need to investigate more." The attorney gave me some advice. Document everything. Don't confront him until I had irrefutable proof. Consider my safety. Men who led double lives could become dangerous when cornered. She also gave me the number of a private investigator who specialized in marital cases. I sat in that parking lot for a long time after hanging up, watching people come and go from the office building, living their normal lives. Everything looked the same as it had yesterday, but nothing was the same. I felt like I'd woken up in an alternate dimension where my entire existence was built on lies. That night, David was especially affectionate. He'd made dinner, pasta carbonara my favorite, and opened a nice bottle of wine. He asked about my presentation, listened attentively to my fabricated story about how it went, told me he was proud of me. We watched a documentary about ancient Rome, his arm around me, my head on his shoulder, exactly like we'd done 1,000 times before. I kept thinking about Claire. Was she sitting alone in their other home, waiting for him? Or did he have some excuse, some business trip or late meeting, that explained his absence tonight? How did he keep track of it all? How did he remember which lies he'd told to whom? "You seem distracted," David said during a commercial break. "Just tired," I said. He kissed my forehead. "You work too hard. You should take a day off soon. Maybe we could take a long weekend, just the two of us." "That sounds nice," I said, even as I wondered whether, next month, on his calendar was already blocked out in gray for a trip with Claire. Over the next 2 weeks, I became obsessed. I hired the private investigator the attorney had recommended. A woman named Patricia who had kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I gave her everything I'd discovered. She told me to keep my routine exactly the same, to not let David suspect anything had changed. "Men like this," Patricia said, "they're incredibly careful. He's been maintaining this for years without you noticing. He's good at it. We need to be better." Patricia followed David for a week. What she discovered made everything so much worse. David didn't just have Claire. There was another woman. A third woman named Michelle. Patricia showed me photos. David leaving a condo building in the afternoon, kissing a blonde woman goodbye. David having coffee with the same woman in a cafe across town. David and Michelle browsing in a bookstore, her hand in his back pocket, both of them laughing. "The pattern is consistent," Patricia explained, spreading photos across her office desk. 3 days a week he's with you. 2 days with Claire, that's the woman from the texts. And 2 days with Michelle. He's rotating between 3 women, 3 households, maintaining 3 separate relationships. I felt like I was drowning. But how? How is that even possible? "He's very, very organized," Patricia said. "Look at this." She pulled up his digital calendar that she'd somehow managed to access. Color-coded schedules. He's essentially working 3 part-time relationships instead of 1 full-time one. To each of you, he's a loving partner who just happens to travel for work or have a demanding client schedule. None of you see the full picture. "But the money," I said. "How does he afford 3 households?" Patricia's expression turned grim. "That's where it gets complicated. I did some digging into his finances. David isn't a consultant, Mrs. Crawford. Or rather, that's not his primary income. Your husband runs what's called a romance investment scheme. He's essentially a high-end con artist." The room spun. "What?" "He targets successful, independent women who don't need financial support. That's you, Claire, and Michelle. All 3 of you work and make decent money. You cover most of your own expenses. What David does is position himself as the supportive partner, the one adding value through emotional labor and household management. Meanwhile, he's been systematically accessing and draining the financial resources of multiple women over the years. But I'd notice if money was missing, I protested. Would you? Patricia pulled out bank statements. He's been doing it slowly, carefully. Small transfers you'd never notice. Using your credit cards for household expenses that were actually for his other households. He refinanced your house 2 years ago, right? Took out $70,000 in equity. I nodded numbly. We'd used that money to renovate the kitchen. David had managed the contractors while I was at work. I found the contractors he supposedly hired, Patricia said. The renovations cost $18,000. The other $52,000? Vanished into offshore accounts. I was going to be sick. How long? How long has he been doing this? Based on what I've found so far? At least 8 years. Before you, there were others. He's been running this same pattern for over a decade. 3 women at a time, rotating through them, replacing them when they get too close to the truth or when he's extracted what he needs. I sat in Patricia's office, trying to process what she was telling me. My husband wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't even just a bigamist. He was a criminal, a professional con artist who had chosen me as a mark, who had manufactured 12 years of fake love while systematically robbing me. And suddenly, I realized something even worse. Patricia, I said slowly, you said he's been doing this for a decade. You said before me, there were others. What happened to them? Patricia's face went very still. Mrs. Crawford, I think you should go to the police. What happened to them? I repeated. She pulled out a folder I hadn't seen before. I only found 2 so far. Jennifer Hartley and Stephanie Nguyen. Both were involved with a man matching David's description, using different names, between 2010 and 2015. Jennifer filed a police report claiming he'd stolen over $100,000 from her, but by the time she went to authorities, he'd disappeared. Changed his name, moved cities, started over. And Stephanie? Patricia hesitated. Stephanie died. House fire in 2015, shortly after she reportedly told friends she'd discovered her boyfriend was living a double life, and she was going to expose him. The room tilted. You think David killed her? I think it's an awfully convenient coincidence, Patricia said carefully. The fire was ruled accidental, but Mrs. Crawford, you need to understand how dangerous this situation is. Men who create elaborate fictional lives don't take well to being exposed. And your husband has been doing this for years. He's got resources you don't even know about. He's got other identities, other bank accounts, probably multiple escape plans. I felt cold all over. What do? You go to the police. Today. You give them everything we've found. You let them investigate the financial crimes, the bigamy, the possible connection to Stephanie's death. And then you get somewhere safe. But I didn't go to the police. Not right away. Maybe I should have. Maybe everything that happened next could have been prevented if I'd just listened to Patricia and done the smart, safe thing. But I was so angry. 12 years of my life stolen. My sense of reality shattered. My trust destroyed. And David was at home right now, probably messaging Claire or Michelle, telling them he loved them, performing the same loving husband routine he'd perfected with me. I wanted him to feel what I felt. I wanted him to understand what it was like to have your entire world revealed as a lie. So instead of going to the police, I went home and did something stupid. I confronted him. I walked into his office without knocking. David was on a video call, smiling at his screen, looking relaxed and handsome in a button-down shirt. When he saw me, his eyebrows raised in surprise. Hey babe, I'm in the middle of. End the call, I said. Something in my voice must have alarmed him because his expression changed. He made a quick excuse to whoever was on the screen and closed his laptop. And what's wrong? I threw a stack of printed photos onto his desk.
Patricia S. Surveillance photo.
David leaving Claire's building. David kissing Michelle. David at a restaurant with a woman I didn't even recognize. His face went white. How long? I asked, my voice shaking. How long have you been doing this? For a long moment, David just stared at the photos. Then slowly he looked up at me, and the expression on his face wasn't guilt or shame or fear. It was cold calculation. Sit down, Emma, he said quietly. I'm not sitting down. I want answers. I want the truth, for once in our entire fake marriage. You want the truth? David stood up, and I instinctively took a step back. Fine. The truth is that you were never smart enough to be anything but a mark. You were so desperate to be loved, so pathetically grateful that someone like me chose you, that you never questioned anything. Not once in 12 years did you ever wonder why I kept such careful boundaries, why I never wanted spontaneous visits, why our life was so scheduled. Each word was a knife. You're a con artist. You've been stealing from me. I've been earning what I'm owed, David corrected. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to maintain the illusion of caring about your boring job stories? Your insipid taste in television? Your mediocre ambitions? I've given you 12 years of performance art, Emma. The money I've taken is compensation for services rendered. I actually laughed, a broken, horrible sound. Services rendered. You mean lying to me every single day? Everyone lies, David said. I'm just better at it than most. And here's what you need to understand, Em. If you go to the police, if you try to expose me, you'll lose everything. I've been very careful about what's in your name versus mine. The house. You'll lose it in the divorce. Your savings? Already mostly gone. And I have documentation that will make you look complicit in everything I've done. Forged signatures on financial documents. Suspicious transfers. You'll be investigated right alongside me. You'd frame me. I whispered. I'd protect myself, he corrected. That's what I do. I survive. And Emma, sweetheart, you need to consider what's in your best interest here. You have no proof of bigamy. Claire and I had a ceremony, but we're not legally married. None of them are legal marriages except ours, and that was strategic on my part. You can't prove the financial fraud without implicating yourself. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to file for a simple divorce, irreconcilable differences. You'll take whatever I let you walk away with. And you'll keep your mouth shut. And if I don't? David smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. There was a woman named Stephanie. She didn't keep her mouth shut. Ask the police what happened to her house. My blood turned to ice. You killed her. I didn't say that. But accidents happen, Emma. Especially to people who make themselves problems. He walked toward me, and I backed up until I hit the doorframe. Go ahead. Go to the police. Try to expose me. See what happens. Or accept that you had 12 good years with a man who was never quite real. And move on with your life. I ran. I grabbed my purse and my keys and I ran out of that house like it was on fire. I got in my car and drove, not even knowing where I was going, just needing to get away from him. David had just confirmed he was a murderer. He'd as much as admitted to killing Stephanie. And he'd threatened to do the same to me if I exposed him. I was shaking so hard I had to pull over. I sat in a parking lot outside a grocery store, watching normal people go about their normal shopping, and tried to figure out what to do. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Crawford? A woman's voice unfamiliar. My name is Claire. I think we need to talk about David. I agreed to meet Claire at a coffee shop across town, somewhere David wouldn't think to look for either of us. My hands were still shaking as I drove there, my mind racing through possibilities. Was this a trap? Was Claire working with David somehow? But when I walked into that coffee shop and saw her sitting at a corner table, I knew immediately that she was just as much a victim as I was. Claire looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled into a messy ponytail. When she saw me, she stood up awkwardly, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Two women who'd been loving the same man without knowing the other existed. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. We sat. A barista brought coffee neither of us had ordered. The normalcy of it felt surreal. How did you find me? I asked. I hired a private investigator 2 months ago, Claire said. I suspected David was cheating. I found you. I found Michelle. She pulled out a folder. I found 8 other women over the past 15 years. You and I were the longest he's kept around. Most only last 2 or 3 years before he drains them and moves on. 8 other women. I felt sick. There's something else, Claire continued. I'm a graphic designer, but I also do some web development. I got curious about David's business website, the consulting company he supposedly runs. It looked legitimate, but something felt off. So I did some digging into the code. She pulled out her laptop and turned it toward me. His website is a facade. All the client testimonials? Fake. The case studies? Stolen from other consultants and rewritten. The contact numbers? They all route to burner phones he controls. David doesn't do any actual consulting work. The money he makes, the money that supports his lifestyle, comes entirely from us. From the women he's scamming. I know, I said. My investigator found the same thing. He refinanced my house and stole the equity. He's been draining my accounts for years. Claire's eyes filled with tears. He took my mother's inheritance. She died last year, left me $300,000. David said we should invest it, that he had a financial advisor friend who could help. I trusted him. I signed the paperwork he brought home. All of it's gone. Every penny. I confronted him today, I said. He threatened me. Implied he'd kill me if I went to the police, like he killed a woman named Stephanie. Claire went very pale. I found her. In my research. The house fire. I think there might be others. I think some of the women who disappeared from his past might not have just walked away. We sat there in that coffee shop, two women who'd loved the same monster, trying to figure out what to do. We should have gone to the police immediately. We should have taken all our evidence and let the law handle it. But we were both thinking the same thing. The law moved slowly. David could disappear before they built a case. He could destroy evidence. He could run to one of his backup identities and start over somewhere else, with new victims. Or he could eliminate the threats we represented. There's a third option, I said slowly. Claire looked at me. What? We make him think he's won. We play along with his game, but we're secretly building an airtight case against him. We coordinate with each other, document everything. And when we have enough evidence that he can't possibly escape, we bury him. That's dangerous, Claire said. If he finds out, he's going to keep hurting people, I interrupted. How many more women, Claire? How many more Stephanies? We can stop him, but we have to be smart about it. I could see her weighing the risks. Then slowly she nodded. What about Michelle? We bring her in. The three of us. We know him better than anyone. We know his patterns, his lies, his weaknesses. We can beat him at his own game. That's how the three of us, me, Claire, and Michelle, became conspirators. We met in secret over the next month, comparing notes, building our case, being very careful to maintain our normal routines with David, so he wouldn't suspect anything had changed. Michelle was the youngest, only 28, and David had done the most damage to her. She'd graduated with student loan debt, and David had convinced her to take out additional loans so they could invest in a business opportunity together. Of course, there was no business. He'd taken the money and it was gone. Michelle was now $140,000 in debt with nothing to show for it. The three of us shared our stories, and a pattern emerged. David targeted women who were financially stable but not wealthy. Women who had something to take, but not enough resources to fight back effectively. He chose women who were somewhat isolated, without strong family connections or large friend groups who might notice inconsistencies in his story. He'd been selecting victims based on careful criteria, the same way a predator selects prey. But we were going to flip the script. Claire used her tech skills to install monitoring software on David's computers and phones. She'd learned his passwords over the years, just like I'd learned his. We started tracking every message, every call, every transaction. Michelle reached out to the other women from his past, the ones who'd survived him, and got statements from them about what he'd done. I contacted Stephanie's family and got copies of the fire investigation report. There were inconsistencies in it, questions that had never been answered. Stephanie had told her sister she was going to expose her boyfriend. 2 days later, her house burned down, and she died of smoke inhalation. The fire had started in the kitchen, supposedly from a stove left on, but Stephanie's sister insisted she was meticulous about things like that. We compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier, financial records showing the money he'd stolen. Messages proving his manipulation. Testimonies from previous victims. Evidence suggesting he might have murdered Stephanie. And then we went to the FBI. Not the local police. We were afraid David might have connections there, might get tipped off. We went to the federal agency that handled financial crimes and interstate fraud. We met with an agent named Sarah Chun who listened to our story with growing alarm. This is one of the most elaborate romance fraud schemes I've seen, Agent Chun said after reviewing our evidence. The length of time, the number of victims, the sophistication of the operation, and the potential murder. We need to move carefully. He can't know we're investigating. The FBI launched a covert investigation. They tracked David's financial transactions, his communications, his movements. They discovered he had 6 different identities, bank accounts in 3 countries, and a network of enablers. Other con artists he'd worked with over the years, people who helped him establish new identities when he needed to disappear. They also found evidence that Stephanie wasn't the only suspicious death. Another woman, Karen Mitchell, had died in a car accident in 2013 after threatening to go to the police about David. The accident investigation had been cursory, but when the FBI took another look, they found signs the brake line had been cut. David wasn't just a con artist. He was a serial predator who'd been operating for at least 15 years, who'd stolen millions of dollars, who'd destroyed countless lives, and who'd killed at least twice to protect his operation. And the entire time, he'd been coming home to me, kissing me goodnight, telling me he loved me. It took 3 months, but finally, the FBI had enough evidence to move. They coordinated the arrest carefully. They wanted to grab David at a moment when he wouldn't have time to destroy evidence or run. Agent Chun called me at work on a Wednesday morning. "Today," she said simply. "Be somewhere public. Somewhere safe. We're taking him into custody at noon." I told my boss I had a family emergency and left the office. I met Claire and Michelle at a restaurant downtown, far from any of David's homes. The 3 of us sat at a booth in the back, unable to eat, unable to do anything but wait. At 12:47 p.m., Agent Chun called. "We have him." The FBI had arrested David at the condo he shared with Michelle, or rather, the condo he'd rented using money stolen from Michelle. He'd been on a video call when they burst in, apparently telling another woman he'd just started targeting that he loved her and couldn't wait to meet her in person next month. Even at the moment of his arrest, he'd been grooming a new victim. The news coverage was immediate and explosive. Local man arrested in elaborate multi-million-dollar romance scheme. Read the headlines. Bigamous con artist lived triple life for years, may have murdered victims who threatened to expose him. My phone started ringing constantly, reporters, friends I hadn't spoken to in years, curious co-workers. I ignored all of it. Claire, Michelle, and I stayed together in that restaurant booth, holding hands across the table, trying to process that it was actually over. But it wasn't over. Not really. Because the arrest was just the beginning of dealing with the aftermath. The financial damage was catastrophic. Between the 3 of us, David had stolen nearly $900,000. My house was in foreclosure. The mortgage payments I'd thought David was making from his business account had been fabricated. Claire had lost her mother's entire inheritance. Michelle was drowning in fraudulent debt. The FBI helped us file claims with the Victim Compensation Program, but recovering stolen money was a slow, complicated process. Most of David's offshore accounts had already been emptied and moved to new accounts we couldn't trace. He'd been preparing for the possibility of being caught, creating multiple layers of financial protection for himself. Then there was the emotional damage. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma from intimate partner abuse. Because that's what it was, she explained. David had been psychologically abusing all of us for years, making us doubt our reality, controlling our lives through deception. "You're going to have trust issues for a while," my therapist said gently. "That's normal. 12 years of being systematically lied to doesn't just go away. You'll question everything. Your own judgment, other people's motives, even your memories of what you thought were good moments." She was right. I'd lie awake at night replaying conversations with David, trying to figure out which parts were real and which were performance. Had he ever actually cared about me at all? Or was every single moment, every laugh and touch and whispered, "I love you"? Nothing but calculated manipulation? The trial took 8 months to begin. David's attorney tried every possible delay tactic, but eventually, we ended up in court. The prosecution charged him with wire fraud, mail fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and 2 counts of murder. I had to testify. So did Claire and Michelle. So did 6 other women David had victimized over the years, women the FBI had tracked down during their investigation. We each told our stories. How he'd charmed us, isolated us, stolen from us. How he'd made us feel like we were the crazy ones when we'd questioned inconsistencies in his stories. One woman, Lisa Chun, had been with David from 2011 to 2014. She testified that she'd gotten pregnant, and David had convinced her to have an abortion, saying he wasn't ready to be a father. She found out later he'd gotten another girlfriend pregnant at the same time, and that woman had kept the baby. David had a 6-year-old son he'd never acknowledged or supported, with a woman who thought he'd died in a car accident when he'd actually just moved cities and changed his name. The prosecutor built a devastating case. They showed the jury the color-coded calendar, the fake consulting business, the offshore accounts. They brought in financial experts who explained how David had been systematically draining his victims. They brought in forensic specialists who testified about the suspicious nature of the fire that killed Stephanie and the car accident that killed Karen. David's defense was that these were all consensual relationships that had simply ended badly, that the money had been gifts, not theft, that he had no involvement in the deaths. They were tragic coincidences, nothing more. But when the prosecution played the recording Claire had secretly made of David threatening her, telling her that accidents happen to women who cause problems, the jury's faces changed. You could see the moment they understood exactly what kind of man they were looking at. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury deliberated for 2 days. Guilty on all counts. I was in the courtroom when the verdict was read. David's face didn't change at all. He just stared straight ahead, that same cold, calculated expression I'd seen in his office when I'd confronted him. Even facing life in prison, he showed no remorse, no emotion, no hint that he understood or cared about the lives he'd destroyed. The judge sentenced him to 45 years in prison for the fraud charges, plus 2 concurrent life sentences for the murders. He'd be 89 years old before he was eligible for parole. Mr. Crawford, the judge said, and it was strange to hear David called by his real name when I'd learned he'd used at least 5 other names over the years. You are a predator of extraordinary cunning and cruelty. You have systematically exploited vulnerable people's desire for love and connection. You have stolen not just their money, but years of their lives, their sense of safety, their ability to trust. And when your victims threatened to expose you, you murdered them. This court hopes that the remainder of your life, spent in confinement, gives you time to develop the conscience you so clearly lack. David said nothing. He was led away in handcuffs, and I never saw him again. That was 18 months ago. I'm sitting in my new apartment now. A small 1-bedroom I rent with money from a job I took at a nonprofit helping fraud victims. I lost the house. I lost most of my savings. I lost 12 years of my life to a man who never existed. But I gained something too. Claire and I are actually friends now. Real friends. We get coffee every weekend and talk about our lives, our healing, our hopes for the future. Michelle moved back to her home state to be closer to family, but we text regularly. The 3 of us have a group chat where we share our victories, no matter how small. A day without crying, a moment of trusting someone new, a good therapy session. We've also started a support group for other victims of romance fraud. It turns out David wasn't unique. There are hundreds of people out there running similar schemes, targeting lonely people and stealing their money and their sense of reality. Our group helps survivors navigate the emotional aftermath, connect with legal resources, and rebuild their lives. I'm not going to lie and say I'm completely healed. I'm not. I still have nightmares where I hear David's voice telling me he loves me, and I wake up feeling sick. I still flinch when someone is too charming, too perfect, too interested. I'm working on dating again, but it's hard. Every time a man compliments me or shows interest, I wonder what he really wants, what he's hiding. My therapist says this is normal. She says trust is like a bone that's been shattered. It can heal, but it takes time. And it might never be quite the same as it was before. You learn to live with the ache. You learn to be more careful. But you can still use it. You can still let people in. I'm trying. Last week, I went on a third date with a man named James who works at the nonprofit with me. He knows my whole story. Everyone there does. He's patient with me when I ask too many questions or need to verify things he's told me. He doesn't pressure me. He lets me set the pace. After dinner, he walked me to my car, and before I got in, he said, "I really like you, Emma. I know you've been hurt, and I know you're scared. I'm not going to rush you. But I want you to know that I'm here, and I'm real, and I'm not going anywhere unless you want me to." And I started crying, right there in the parking lot, because it was the first time since David that I'd actually believed someone might be telling me the truth. James held me while I cried. And he didn't try to fix it or minimize it. He just let me feel what I needed to feel. Maybe that's what I've learned from all of this. Real love, actual, genuine love, isn't a performance. It's not perfect. It's not a scripted routine or a color-coded calendar of romantic gestures. It's messy and uncomfortable and patient. It's someone holding you while you cry about someone else who hurt you. It's building trust slowly, one honest moment at a time. David stole 12 years from me. He stole my money, my sense of safety, my ability to trust easily. But he didn't steal everything. I'm still here. I'm still fighting. I'm still learning how to be open to love again, even though it terrifies me. The other day, I was cleaning out a box of old things from the house, items I'd salvaged before the foreclosure. I found a photo from our wedding day, David and me, smiling at the camera, looking so happy and in love. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the man in the picture with the monster I'd discovered. And then I realized something. That man in the photo never existed. He was a character David played, a role he performed. The real David was the cold, calculating predator who threatened to kill me in his office. Everything else was an illusion. Once I understood that, I was able to throw the photo away. I didn't burn it dramatically or tear it up in anger. I just put it in the trash because it wasn't real, and I didn't need to carry it anymore. I carry other things now. I carry the friendship of women who survived the same trauma. I carry the knowledge that I'm stronger than I thought I was, that I was able to bring down a man who'd been operating for 15 years. I carry hope that someday, the hypervigilance will fade, and I'll be able to trust my own judgment again. And I carry a lesson that I share with every person who comes through our support group. If someone's love feels too perfect, too scripted, too consistent, if they never have bad days or weird habits or inconvenient needs, they're not being real with you. Real people are messy and complicated. Real love is built on imperfection and honesty, not performance. David told me, "I love you," every single morning for 12 years. He said it with the same inflection, the same timing, the same routine. It felt like security. It felt like constancy. It felt like love. But it was just another line in a script he'd perfected. The real tragedy isn't that I heard those words from 2 phones that morning. The real tragedy is that I'd been hearing them from a recording all along, and I'd convinced myself it was real. Now when James tells me he cares about me, it's awkward and uncertain. He stumbles over his words. He shows up with his hair messy and his shirt wrinkled. He forgets to text back sometimes. He's imperfect and human and present. And for the first time in 12 years, I think I'm finally hearing something real. They say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I don't know if that's true, but I know that surviving David made me wiser, more compassionate, and more determined to help others avoid the nightmare I lived through. I lost 12 years, but I'm not losing the rest of my life. That's my regret. Not that I trusted David, but that I ignored the tiny inconsistencies, the small red flags, because I wanted so badly to believe in the fairy tale he was selling. I regret that I didn't ask harder questions, that I didn't trust my instincts when something felt off. But I'm learning to forgive myself for that. Because David was a professional, and I was just someone who wanted to be loved. And wanting to be loved isn't a crime. Being afraid to love again isn't weakness. Slowly, carefully rebuilding trust isn't failure. It's survival. It's healing. It's hope. And someday, when I'm ready, it will be love again. Real love. The imperfect, messy, honest kind. The kind that doesn't need 2 phones. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.